Sean Diddy Combs, once the king of hip-hop empire building, just snapped after the judge pulled a stunt no one saw coming, bringing in Johnny Depp's lawyer to help pick the jury. That's right. The same guy who tore Amber Heard's case apart is now playing chess in Diddy's courtroom. And let's just say Diddy did not take it well.
Do you think it's going to be tough to sit a fair and impartial jury in Sean Combs' criminal case?
Well, I think they will have a fair and impartial jury. I think the problem is going to come in, with the Cassandra Ventura's tape. I mean, whether you've seen that before, you're certainly going to see that during the trial. And I think that's highly problematic, obviously, for Diddy, whether they've seen it before or not.
But what if this move wasn't about fairness? What if it was the setup? Stick around, because what you're about to learn next will change how you see this entire trial. This is Chatterfuse, where scandals speak louder than PR. Hit that subscribe button for more untamed truth from inside Hollywood's darkest corners. And while Diddy may be fuming over the courtroom power play, things only get messier when you look at the jury pool. Over 160 potential jurors have already been dragged through a gauntlet of questioning, and we're down to just 35 maybes. But here's the catch. This isn't some civil dispute over bad contracts. It's a federal criminal case involving sex trafficking, coercion, and racketeering, which means the wrong person in that jury box could tank everything. Some jurors flat out admitted they've seen the viral hotel footage. Others confess they're unsure if they could stay neutral. And let's be honest, who could blame them? When a media storm this loud rolls through, even the most level-headed citizen is bound to catch some of the fallout. To make things even trickier, the court's now gone into lockdown mode. Anonymous jury, limited access, and behind-the-scenes psychological vetting. Jury consultants are combing through social media posts, news habits, even subtle body language, all to root out hidden bias before opening arguments ever begin. But here's the real danger no one wants to say out loud. It takes just one juror who already made up their mind. One who thinks being on this trial makes them the next Netflix star. One who's chasing drama over justice. And when the charges on the table carry life in prison, that one voice could be the loudest in the room. And fueling that tension even further is a name that keeps echoing through the courtroom, Cassie Ventura. She's not listed as the primary victim in this criminal case, but her presence looms large. The same woman who settled with Diddy after filing a civil lawsuit alleging abuse, coercion, and disturbing sexual rituals is now back in the legal spotlight. And here's where it gets legally murky. Cassie reportedly signed a non-disclosure agreement as part of her settlement. So how is she even allowed to testify? Legal experts are split. Some argue that NDAs don't hold up when criminal conduct is involved. Others say the government is bending rules to make an example out of a high-profile defendant. And if that sounds familiar, it should. Critics are already drawing parallels to the Bill Cosby trial, where prior settlements and confidentiality deals were also overturned in court. And with that comes a deeper, more uncomfortable question. Would the system treat a white celebrity the same way? Regardless of how the court rules on her testimony, Cassie's story is already baked into public perception. That viral hotel video, the lawsuit that was settled in less than 24 hours, the whispers that became headlines. Whether she sits in the witness box or not, her shadow is already in the jury room. And in a case this volatile, shadows speak volumes. And it's not just Cassie's allegations haunting this case. It's the blueprint prosecutors claim her lawsuit revealed. According to the federal indictment, this isn't a story about one toxic relationship. It's the unraveling of a system, a calculated operation spanning years, possibly decades, where drugs, fear, and celebrity influence weren't side effects. They were the tools. Prosecutors allege that Diddy used his fame like a magnet, drawing in women with promises of opportunity, status, and connection. But behind the velvet ropes and private jets, they say he orchestrated events that were anything but consensual. These weren't parties. They weren't random. They were what insiders called freakoffs, drug-fueled, hyper-controlled gatherings where boundaries dissolved and cameras rolled. And those cameras, they weren't just souvenirs. The recordings, prosecutors argue, were used as leverage, to shame, to silence, to control. A cycle where participation wasn't always voluntary, and leaving came with a price. This isn't about salacious gossip. It's about federal crimes, sex trafficking, racketeering, coercion, and intimidation. A legal trifecta, often reserved for organized crime, now aimed squarely at a man who once ruled the music industry. The prosecution is building a case not on a single event, but on a pattern. A pattern where women were allegedly isolated from support, manipulated through drugs and psychological tactics, and kept quiet through fear or blackmail. And while there are other accusers, one person's claims gave them the framework they needed. Cassie's lawsuit was the turning point. It didn't just make headlines, it made connections. It laid out the alleged behaviors, the timelines, the locations, even the names. For prosecutors, it became the roadmap, a starting point that pointed to something far larger, far darker than the public had ever seen. And now, they're following that map, line by line, room by room, tape by tape, because this isn't just about who Diddy was in private, it's about whether that private world was criminal by design. And if the allegations weren't already disturbing enough, one piece of evidence is doing most of the heavy lifting: the hotel surveillance video from 2016. It's short, it's silent, but it speaks volumes. In the grainy black and white footage, you see Diddy, one of the most powerful figures in music, strike Cassie in a hallway of a luxury Los Angeles hotel. She falls, he kicks her, then drags her across the floor like she's nothing. No audio, no context, just a man and a woman, and a moment that's hard to unsee. Jurors who previewed the tape have called it deeply upsetting, disturbing, and impossible to forget. And that's exactly what makes it so potent. Because in a courtroom built on objectivity, raw emotion changes everything. You don't need to understand the backstory to feel the impact. That's the prosecution's advantage. They're treating the video not just as evidence of assault, but as a visual metaphor, a glimpse into a world they say was built on fear, domination, and unchecked power. It's not just about what happened in that hallway, it's about what that hallway represents: control behind closed doors when the cameras were supposed to be off. And prosecutors are counting on jurors seeing the pattern, not just the punch. The defense, however, isn't trying to erase the footage. They know they can't, so they're leaning into it, arguing that what the jury sees is a tragic low point in an emotionally charged long-term relationship. They describe it as a moment of personal failure, not criminal intent, not part of a system, not proof of a larger scheme. They'll argue that relationships, especially high-profile ones under stress and substance abuse, can spiral. That regret is not the same as racketeering. But here's the challenge they can't undo. Once a jury has watched someone get kicked and dragged on tape, how do you walk that back? How do you ask them to separate that one violent frame from everything else they're about to hear? Because in the court of public opinion, that tape was already the trial. And for some jurors, it may be the verdict. And with the public fixated on that footage, Diddy's legal team is now playing a high-stakes game of damage control. This isn't their first time in the fire. His defense is stacked with elite names, attorneys who've defended cult leaders, rappers, and Wall Street criminals. These aren't courtroom rookies. They're here for war. Their core argument: Diddy's world was unorthodox, yes, but it wasn't illegal. They describe his lifestyle as one rooted in adult freedom, parties, relationships, and choices made between consenting adults. They claim the so-called freak-offs weren't trafficking, they were fantasy. But here's their problem. It's one thing to argue lifestyle. It's another to explain away bruises, fear, or silence. Their job now is to reframe the most graphic pieces of evidence, videos, testimonies, patterns, as isolated human moments, flawed, not criminal, messy, not malicious. And at the heart of that narrative is a single message: Diddy is not perfect, but he's not a predator. It's a message they're counting on 12 strangers to believe. And while the lawyers argue the law, Diddy's body tells its own story. He's shown up to court looking more subdued than superstar, muted outfits, graying hair, and a tension that's hard to miss. At one point, he even apologized to the judge for being nervous. For a man used to controlling stages and boardrooms, this courtroom is a different arena, and he doesn't look like the one in charge. He's also been unusually hands-on during jury selection. Observers say he's been nodding or shaking his head discreetly as potential jurors are questioned. Subtle, but telling. For a man whose freedom hangs in the balance, these quiet cues might be his last form of control. The judge, meanwhile, isn't playing games. One prospective juror was removed after revealing ties to HBO, which recently aired a documentary about Diddy. Another failed to disclose a connection to the Legal Aid Society, but was allowed to stay. The judge is walking a razor's edge between fairness and firmness. And then there's Ben Chu, the wild card. He's advised the court that Diddy's best bet may lie with younger, more open-minded jurors, especially men who may be less emotionally affected by graphic testimony, not because women aren't capable of fairness, but because this case deals in themes that hit harder for some than others. At this point, it's not just about the facts. It's about who's hearing them. 12 people, 6 alternates, 1 decision, and every twitch, word, and whisper in that courtroom could shape the rest of Diddy's life. And now, with the jury almost locked in and emotions running high, the real fight begins. Sean Diddy Combs has officially rejected a plea deal. No shortcuts, no negotiations. He's taking this case to trial, facing every charge head-on. That means both sides will now move forward with their final preemptory challenges, carefully shaping the panel of strangers who will decide his fate. The trial is expected to last up to 8 grueling weeks, packed with disturbing evidence, high-profile witnesses, and public scrutiny that won't let up. Cameras may not be in the jury room, but you can bet the world will be watching. And the question still lingers. Can a trial this massive, this emotionally loaded, truly deliver justice? Or has the courtroom already become a stage where perception plays louder than proof? Diddy built an empire by controlling the narrative. This time, he doesn't get to hold the mic. If you want the unfiltered truth behind Hollywood's biggest trials, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe to Chatter Fuse. We bring the receipts every time.